take, Sonic Adventure 2 is a fun game. Hot take, Sonic Adventure 2 was never good in the first place. Hot take, Sonic Adventure 2 is pretty much perfect, and if you say anything bad about it, you're a miserable person who doesn't want other people to enjoy things. There, we got all the hot takes out of our system. Can we just enjoy the discussion now without losing our minds?
Hey, I didn't say any of that. Don't talk down to me. I clicked on your video, asshole.
Alright, maybe we're getting a little defensive these days. If someone says something bad about a thing you love, then you fear that they're going to try to talk you out of liking it or belittle you for your enjoyment of it. It's like a form of gaslighting. Of course there's a problem with the game. Everyone knows that. You know that. On the other hand, we have people making reviews where they are going to give a contrarian opinion and feel the need to defend themselves as much as possible before doing something as simple as speaking honestly about their experience. Sometimes they do this through a joke, sometimes they do this as politely as possible by assuring the people watching that this is only their opinion and they don't wish to change yours. And some people start off pretty aggressive as the backlash is so certain that they want to make fun of the people responding before they even get the chance to. But I guess when it comes to this video, simply acknowledging these two separate sides isn't going to prevent them from speaking up. I do have positive and negative things to say about this game, and if you don't like that, you can stick around and leave a mean comment, it doesn't matter. I don't really have a solution to this issue, I don't think anyone does. If you don't like criticism, you might not like this video. If you don't like blind praise, you might still not like this video. I guess I do kind of have a bias with this one. My favorite game of all time is Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, a game that was such a new experience for me when I played it all the way back in 2007. I put hundreds of hours into this game. Over the summer there would be days where this would be all I did. Nowadays I can certainly say the game hasn't aged all that well. There was a limited number of voice actors, leaving a lot of the characters sounding the same. Some of the physics are really off, especially with how weightless you feel when you jump. The game is buggy as hell, but while these are all things that, yes, I think would be valid critiques, I think they kind of add positive things to the experience as well. For me, at least. The bugs are funny as hell.
What the fuck? Wait.
Every guard in the game having the same voice is also funny as hell, and I like how weightless the jumping feels in this game. I like testing just how far you can go with those jumps. That paired with me growing up with the game and it being such a new experience, plus me genuinely thinking the story is interesting, I don't know, I guess it's hard for me to dislike a game like this even if I do grow older and start to notice things with it. It's just a situation where my love for the game is so strong that something that could be perceived as a negative could actually be a positive in my case. I'll still make fun of it and I'll still acknowledge the criticism, but yeah, sometimes a game being outdated doesn't matter if you have the right connection to it, I guess, is what I'm saying. And I think it's okay to express that rather than criticize a game if you care about the game enough. But I think it's pretty obvious to anyone who watches my content that I'm not for silencing people giving their opinions either. But in the end, there are problems with Sonic Adventure 2. It makes sense to not enjoy Sonic Adventure 2. We'll talk about it. But here's what I think of Sonic Adventure 2. I'm just going to go in order with the levels and boss battles. I have enough to say about this one to literally talk about everything. It's going to be a long episode, guys. City Escape. It's my favorite level of the entire series. 100% sincere. No exaggerating whatsoever. I'm not saying it's objectively the best, but it is such a fun start to this game, and it fully immerses you in the experience of the game's story. It's a level with a beginning, middle, and ending that tells a story as you're playing through it. There's your initial escape from custody where you skate down the city street, your run-in section where gun robots have started to track you down, but it's nothing you can't handle, and it all ends with a run sequence that looks like it took some inspiration from that section in the first adventure game, as the military sends out the big guns and you have to outrun it. This paired with a great song, the fact that the level never seems to be running low on different ideas, and the level design embraces every single one of Sonic's mechanics, including ones you unlock later. Bouncing on those rails is so freaking satisfying. Makes City Escape my favorite level of the entire series. After this, we get our first boss battle, which is fine. It's a nice, easy fight that helps you understand how to use Sonic in combat for these fights, which is mainly just, spamming the homing attack. Wild Canyon, pretty great start to the treasure hunting stages, which, yeah, I enjoy. It's like a little game of hide and seek in an open space. I like that we get a couple of levels that are built more on exploration rather than just racing to the finish as fast as possible. The Sonic and Shadow stages are longer because they're designed to sprint through, so you don't miss a ton, while these stages condense all of the level's details into a small area, making it harder to locate missing emerald pieces, or keys, or emeralds. Wild Canyon, I think, works in its simplicity as the first treasure hunt stage. You have the center, the left, the right, and the underground. 4 different areas that you can quickly cover when searching for the emerald. Your radar should start going off once you enter at least one of these areas. Each area looks a little different, adding some variety to the stage, and the simple nature of it being 4 areas works really well as an introduction level, where others will start to make it a bit more complicated. I love the music in this stage too, though the lyrics are pretty laughable.
I gotta chase her back, huh? Yeah, rude, she's sexy and smooth. A double cross by thief, that's out for my juice. There you are, come here, little thief. Think you can fly and get away quick? Give up the emerald or die, I don't love you.
Comparing it to Adventure 1, I think it takes one big step up and one tiny step down. The radar was able to detect all 3 emerald pieces in Adventure 1, while Adventure 2 only lets you detect 1 at a time in the game's preferred order. Not a major problem for the first 2 Knuckles stages, but it will get annoying within time. The big step up it takes from the first game, however, is that the levels are now specifically crafted for Knuckles and Rouge, while in Adventure 1 they mainly just gave you smaller portions of a Sonic stage. The Knuckles levels in Adventure 1, while not bad, definitely felt more awkward and less thought out than they do in the sequel, so there's some pretty big props to Adventure 2. After this we get our second boss fight, which is really fucking easy. Just mash buttons, you will not lose this fight. Prison Lane. Story-wise, I think it's an okay level. It's essentially the Prison Break level, so having Tails in a mech suit is actually a reasonable decision here. I'm not the biggest fan of mech stages, but I can understand the approach at times, and I think some of these levels are actually okay. As for Prison Lane, it's easy enough I suppose, and the music is good. You'll keep hearing me say pretty basic things about the music. Sonic music is normally good, but I want to keep that point going from when we actually make it to a level that I don't think has good music. I like how in some mech stages you can get through them much quicker once you have all the power-ups, so it's annoying that this stage has slow-moving elevators that force you to maintain that pace throughout the entire level. Metal Harbor, another really great Sonic level, but maybe a little bit too short. If I was ever grinding for Chow Garden stuff, I normally use this stage growing up because I would be able to collect the maximum amount of stuff I need here, and it didn't take as long to complete a city escape. After this we get our first fight with Shadow, and it's really easy, although the timing was always kinda confusing to me. Like, I don't know how to predict when Shadow's gonna jump and cancel out my homing attack, but it normally doesn't take me any longer than 30 seconds to beat this fight anyways, so I never really cared that much to figure it out. Maybe it's just random. The combat is not something that they seem to put a ton of thought into in this game. There are some really good boss battles in here, but I'd say they're pretty few. Definitely not the strongest game boss-wise. Green Forest. I don't know why anyone complains about the timer on the stage. It's a Sonic game and they give you more than a generous amount of time to beat it. I fucking love this stage. The music really adds to the frantic nature as you're trying to get off the island before it explodes. I think some of the game's controls can be a minor issue in this one. There's parts where using the homing attack on springs is pretty necessary in order to continue, and I feel that sometimes it has a hard time latching you onto the thing you want to hit and instead makes you jump outwards, causing you to fall to your death in most cases. But it's not a major issue here. It only happens occasionally. All in all, it's a pretty fun level. And it's cool that we got 2 Sonic stages back to back. However, the only issue with that is now we get 2 Tails stages and 2 Knuckles stages before we get another Sonic one. So even though it's fairly balanced, it does start to feel like a really long time until we get to play as Sonic again. Plus we have a cart level in the middle of it as well. Pumpkin Hill, another good Knuckles stage. It builds off the first one pretty well in terms of raising the difficulty. Once again, it's kind of split into 4 sections, the center and the 3 different mountains, so you should be able to get a reading on your radar fairly quickly. However, these mountains are pretty large and so is the area in the center, so simply gliding over the mountain with the next emerald might not be enough to get your radar going. You might have to explore it more. All of the stuff in the center is also a lot more scattered. And if that wasn't enough, there's these weird pumpkin-shaped rocks out in the distance that you can glide to that could potentially be holding the pieces of the emeralds. All of that, paired with the new addition of the digging tool as pieces of the emerald can now be hidden underground, does give this one a boost in difficulty, in comparison to the first stage at least, but it's still pretty easy. Hell, considering how scattered everything is, if you do manage to fall off the side, the game even catches you a break and allows you to float back up instead of fall to your death. It still had your back. For now. This is a game that reuses a lot of assets from each level, which I think is fine. They change it up just enough, and all these characters are often in the same location, so it makes sense story-wise. But Pumpkin Hill manages to stand out with the Halloween theme it's going for. These assets are reused in the Shadow Stage Skyrail, but with it being the daytime, it almost feels like it's going for more of a Grand Canyon theme than a Halloween theme. So it's nice having a stage that stands out from the others. Music, as always, is pretty damn good. I know the guy who wrote the lyrics isn't the best dude, but the guy who wrote the music seems like a Chad. And I do like the concept of the lyrics expressing what's going on in Knuckles' heads during each stage. I've mentioned before that I have a video on the Sonic music coming out eventually. Sonic music with lyrics, that is. And I will be talking about these raps more in that one, once it's out. Mission Street. I hate Mission Street. I think that this level is very frustrating, with missiles constantly being shot at you from the sky, so you can't really see them until it's too late. I also just don't think it's a very fun level or design. You are basically just on a highway the entire times. In terms of the story, it doesn't make a lot of sense either. If Sonic is trying to lay low, hell, Amy and Tails too now, they just helped a fugitive escape prison and destroyed government property. Why did they go back to the city Sonic got caught in? It's so they could be there when Eggman's making his big speech, but that's really it. Hell, they still could have been anywhere else to get this message. Apparently people in the Middle East heard the message loud and clear too. So yeah, just skip the city shit and go to the desert already. The music in the stage is really solid, and I like the wanted signs for Tails. I like that these levels do add to the story with details like this. They didn't want Tails originally, but now they do because he's helping a criminal. But that's about as far as my compliments for Mission Street go. I think the level is mainly a hassle, and doing the additional mission for this level also sucks. The Collect 100 Rings challenge should not be this much of a bitch to accomplish, but Mission Street barely has any rings lying around. With all the robots that are shooting at you and the missiles launching from the sky, it is super easy to get hit and have to start all over again. Fuck Mission Street. It's last place for now, but we'll see if it stays there. This is a ranking video now. Aquatic Mine. I don't like this one that much. I do appreciate it for providing the air necklace, as Knuckles' portion in the final level is miserable without it. Granted, getting that thing used to stress the hell out of me when I was a kid. Honestly though, I don't think there's much else to enjoy here. It does raise the difficulty by not only having more areas to explore than the previous two stages, but making them a lot more hidden, where everything in Pumpkin Hill and Wild Canyon was out in the open. Also, the whole raising and lowering the water levels to access other points is tedious. Like, I get why they did it, it adds a layer of challenge, but there's a fun challenge and there's a tedious challenge, and this is absolutely a tedious challenge. It's not hard to do, it just makes the level take longer. If I were to suggest anything, maybe put a little bit more focus on Knuckles as a combative character and throw some new enemies into these stages that guard certain areas. That could be a more engaging way to put up the difficulty. I don't even mind them making you have to explore hidden areas that aren't clearly out in the open. That part I think is a good boost in difficulty for this stage, but I always kind of groan when I get there and I have to go up to that top area and activate the switches. It's not fun. Also, and this one's probably just me, but I don't care for the music in this stage. It's not that it sounds bad or annoying, it's more so just on the bland side than anything. But at the same time, I do think it fits the tone of the level, but yeah, I think the level's kind of boring. I almost feel like you could get a cool pool room vibe going with this stage, make it a little bit creepy. You already have these ghosts flying around in the Knuckles stages, build on that horror element a little bit. Honestly, just being in these small cluttered areas in the sewer alone can add to the anxiety. Granted, the whole back rooms and pool rooms thing is kind of a newer phenomenon, but it's partially because of old games like this. Route 101. Boring. I appreciate it for being short and the music is decent, but I mean, look at it, it's fucking nothing. They added a race mode with this that you have to complete in order to get all the emblems, and fuck them for that, because they did not put thought into how these were designed at all, and controlling this shit is incredibly frustrating. Fuck whoever created the mission where you can't hit cars too. That shit spawns behind you sometimes, making beating the mission somewhat luck-based. The don't hit the walls mission was also a dick move considering how poorly this section controls, but at least the walls don't randomly spawn in front of you. The actual level in the game is easy enough. It's not fun, but it's at least not going to hold you back or anything. It's just going to be a little bit boring, but you get through it. Hidden Base. Okay, here's a Tails stage that I can get behind. I think the length is reasonable, the music is top-notch, fits the mood of what they're doing perfectly. I like that we get some classic Eggman robots for Tails to fight in this level. Granted, I think they probably could have thrown in a few more. I think the level is challenging, but not ridiculous like Mission Street. With your new abilities, you can skip certain portions of the level and flex your mad speedrunning skills. There's a few alternate paths you can take, which makes exploring the level more fun, and all in all, I just think it's a solid way to do a mech stage. No missiles launching from the sky without any way of detecting them, no long elevator sequence. This is a fun level. Pyramid Cave. Another one that I've heard complaints about that I think are just kinda dumb. Maybe I don't hear that many complaints, maybe it's just that old Pro Jared video, which I kinda liked because it had a new perspective on the game, but I can't stand behind most of the stuff he said in that video. The issues I've heard with this one is that the puzzles slow down the pace. You mean that object that you have to place in a hole, like, twice? The first time it's right in front of you to make sure you understand how it works, and the second time it literally demands that you do it quickly, otherwise the door is going to shut before you can make it back to complete the puzzle. Also, there's a ghost chasing you around and you kind of want to go fast so he doesn't catch you. I'm fine with puzzles in a Sonic game as long as they're implemented into the game properly, and with it literally being a time trial, I think it works fine here. Nothing like the torches in Sonic 4. The rest of this level I think is a blast. It gives you the bouncing ability, which I think is a very fun move that I wish the other games of the series would implement. I love spamming this shit, it feels so satisfying. You really feel the weight of Sonic hitting the ground every single time. He's like a giant bouncy ball and it's great. There's some big open areas to run in, but still enough obstacles like the ghosts and rings that you jump through to make it feel more alive. I don't really understand any arguments about momentum in this stage. If a level forces you to slow down, then yes, that is annoying. But if a level throws in some challenges that might slow you down the first time, but you can learn from on replays, and then really speed for all these sections, I don't see that as a level killing momentum. I see that as a level becoming more difficult, but there is still a way to maintain that speed if you get better at the game. If every single level was as easy as Green Hill Zone or City Escape, yeah, it would get old after a while. You want the levels to increase in difficulty. I don't like it when the increase in difficulty comes from something really tedious and boring, but I just don't think the Sonic stages do that in this game. For the most part. We'll talk about Crazy Gadget. Anyways, I love this stage and disagree with anyone who would call it a weaker level in the game. It's also just nice to be controlling Sonic again, honestly. Death Chamber. I'm not going to lie, this is the only level in the entire game where I had to look up the music on YouTube to try to remember it. It's so forgettable. This stage is a mess. It's got a creative enough design, and some of it is fun to explore, but with the length of this fucker, yeah, I wish we had that treasure radar from Adventure 1 back. This is miserable. I've had some very nice run-ins with this stage, and some really long and boring ones as well. It builds on the difficulty from the other stages of scale alone, but on top of that, there are portions you can only access by digging in certain areas, which makes it so easy to get lost. It is the second to last Knuckles stage, so that boost in difficulty is only fair, but talking about my own personal enjoyment of this level, it really depends. I think simply adding the treasure tracker from Adventure 1, which you can do through modding the game on PC, makes this one so much more playable. There's some decent ideas on this map, but I feel without the old radar, it's more frustrating than fun. It's just so easy to get lost and second guess yourself and try to figure out how to get back to certain rooms. It's kind of an annoying level, but I've gotten really lucky with it before, and I don't mind running around this map for like 3 to 5 minutes. When I'm stuck here for fucking 10 minutes, yeah, I really don't enjoy it. After this, we finally get another boss battle, which is Knuckles versus King Boom Boo, which I'm gonna assume they named him King Boom Boo because they wanted to name him King Boo, but then realized that Mario already did that, so they just threw the word boom in the middle of it, because this is a series that likes to attach the word boom to things. It's an alright fight, I suppose, but it does get old after a while. A lot of waiting in this fight. Still, they managed to find a way to make it work with Knuckles' abilities, so I'll give them props for that. I also really like the design of King Boom Boo. I'm just gonna call him King Boo. Fuck Boom Boo, that sounds so fucking stupid. The fight also takes place in a small portion of the level we just played through, which is a nice attention to detail. I mean, I guess you could argue it's also laziness to not have to create new assets, but I think it works. After this fight, we get the Egg Golem fight, which I think is a nice step up from the first Sonic boss battle we had earlier. Eternal Engine. Not fond of this one either. Honestly, I think the Eggman mech stages are a lot better than the Tails ones. It's our first exposure to the Space Colony arc in the hero mode, so that's kind of neat I suppose, but I greatly prefer the Robotnik version of the stage where they play with the gravity, actually taking advantage of this being a level that takes place in space. This one is just... it's not the worst, but it's not that enjoyable either. It's certainly not a Mission Street, but yeah, I'm normally looking forward to getting this one out of the way. Meteor Herd, final Knuckles stage, and despite the occasional bullshit placement of emerald pieces, I actually think this one works pretty well. For starters, I really like the music in this one. I think after Pumpkin Hill we went a little downhill with that, so it's nice that we got something pretty good to end on. I also just like the look and scale of this level. It's a really large map like Death Chamber and Aquatic Mines, but everything's also out in the open like Wild Canyon and Pumpkin Hill. I think it's a better approach to making a more difficult treasure hunting stage, as it relies more on giving you more ground to cover rather than making you confused where you even are, or making you play with different switches. There's also some fun secrets in this level. It blew my mind as a kid when I was replaying the game and realized that you could actually go underneath that thing you and Rouge have the fight on. Get a good look at that lava pit. Pretty great way to end things off for Knuckles, although we do have one more boss battle for him, which is a fight with Rouge the Bat. The only rivalry in the game to only have one boss fight rather than two. It's fine, pretty easy, but still nice of them to include. I think story-wise, Knuckles and Rouge probably have the weakest connection as they really only interact with each other at the start of the game, and in this one part right here, not counting the, finale of the game. Meanwhile, with Eggman, he has such a long rivalry with Sonic and Tails that their pair-up worked perfectly. And with Shadow, they do a nice rule of threes. Still, the way these two just kind of bicker at one another works fine too. They aren't two characters with a ton of history, which is why Knuckles is confused by some of Rouge's actions. Rouge is more or less teasing Knuckles in a lot of their interactions. These aren't two people who despise one another. Crazy Gadget. I'd say this is the only Sonic stage with a pace killer in it. Fuck you. Whose fault was that? Whose fucking fault was that? It was Matt. Fuck you, Matt.
I've never played Sonic Adventure 2.
Crazy Gadget. I'd say this is the only Sonic stage with a pace killer in it, with the final gravity puzzle. I have more or less grown indifferent to it. I don't love this section, I don't hate it, but where I don't agree that Green Forest or Pyramid Cave are pace killers, this one I feel like I can actually give that to people. It's possible to get through the gravity portion really fast, but it isn't easy to, and honestly normally just feels worth it to take it slow so you don't accidentally die and have to start over. It's a weaker part for sure. Other than that, I love this level. Again, the music just works so well. There's kind of this urgency feeling to it, kind of similar to what we had in Green Forest, while also feeling more climatic. I also enjoy Eggman's voiceover in this level, sending you little messages demanding that you get there faster. We're really painting a hostage situation here. Maybe that's a little too dark for a Sonic game. But hey, they go darker, so you forget about this part pretty quickly. It's definitely not a stage you're going to be replaying in order to collect stuff for the Chow Garden, but it's a good near end of the game experience, and with enough practice you can get through a majority of the stage pretty quickly. It's just that one part at the end that slows things down. But maybe you're okay with that occasionally. Some people are, and if you're not, it's the only part of the game that I would legitimately call a pace killer in Sonic's levels. After this stage, we get our second to last boss fight in Hero Mode, and it's a rematch between Tails and Eggman, which is actually a good deal harder than the first one. Once you get the hang of it, you shouldn't have any issues in this fight. It's just that you actually need to dodge Eggman or Tails attacks depending which mode you're playing, rather than button mash, which you could easily get away with in the first fight. These two can use special attacks in this fight, and if they hit, they do a hefty amount of damage. So just sitting there spamming buttons is not going to do the trick. The significance of this fight is also pretty strong. It builds off of the first adventure game pretty well, where in Adventure 1, Tails wants to prove himself so he can save the day without Sonic's help, and in this game he literally has to take over for Sonic, at least temporarily. I think it's a really sad but also heartwarming moment, especially when considering the fact that, they obviously aren't going to kill Sonic. But I do appreciate the narrative build-up from the first adventure game. Adventure 1 and Adventure 2 don't acknowledge each other too much. There's a couple of moments.
Station Square saved from a life-threatening missile attack. The city has awarded its famed prize to the boy who saved Station Square.
But I think a lot of the character themes are still there, and growing, so I appreciate that. Final Rush. Fun level, easy to beat, pain in the ass to speedrun. You can skip large portions of this level, but your movement has to be perfect or you will fall to your death. I swear I've seen so many people do this effortlessly through the entire stage, where they just do the bounce move and land on a rail below them. For me, I'm okay at exploiting the spin dash to jump over certain areas, getting to skip a bit, but I fuck up almost every single time I try to jump ahead on the rails below. Still, I love that the level gives you that as an option. I think grinding is fun in Adventure 2. It feels like you're more in control of it than in a game like Unleashed or Generations. Two good games, don't get me wrong, whenever there's a grinding heavy level or mission, it just doesn't feel the same. Granted, those levels are a lot more polished. I swear jumping over rail to rail, it just doesn't work sometimes in Adventure 2. I do the same thing every single time, and sometimes it sends me to the other rail, and sometimes it makes me jump off completely and die. It is not consistent. In terms of the design of the level, it's a little silly. It's just a bunch of rails and platforms lying around, but due to the fast pace and the scale of the stage, I'm still able to get immersed. I mean, it takes place in space. You could say this is just a bunch of broken shit that's just lying around. It's broken debris in space. I definitely think this looks better as a close-up than it does in the Frontiers footage. Not doubting Frontiers, I'm actually looking forward to it, but come on, that looks silly. After this, we get one more fight with Shadow, and as a kid, I thought this fight was the most amazing thing ever. As an adult, I just wait for the character to get ahead and then charge at them as they do their special attack, which causes them to stand still for a couple of seconds, leaving themselves vulnerable. It loses some of the magic when you explain what you're actually doing. Still, it being a fight where the two characters are essentially having a race while attacking each other does make for a fitting showdown between these two. Sonic and Shadow don't have a ton of screen time together in this game, but I think they give them just enough. If this was the first time we saw them since their first cutscene together, it wouldn't have worked nearly as well. I like this ending because it feels like it's the first time these two are actually able to have a conversation with one another. They both know that they are in for a fight, but the fact they both made it this far gives them both enough mutual respect for one another to not just start throwing insults immediately. Alright, onto the dark mode. I'll be skipping over the rival fights since we just covered them on hero mode, and they aren't really any different on dark mode, you're just playing as the other character this fight. Iron Gate. I actually like this one alright. Unlike Prison Lane, the power-ups you get for Eggman actually make this level a lot more enjoyable as you can hover around and skip parts of the level. I know that might sound like an insult to praise the ability to skip, but it's not so much about me wanting to get the stage over with, it's more about me liking the ability to challenge how far you can go with one move. how far you can get with one spin dash, how far you can get with one hover. That's always been a part of Sonic that I've found fun. I think that's the same case with a lot of people. It's a game made for speedrunning, even if you're not a speedrunner. On top of that, I just think Eggman is more interesting to play as than Tails in this game. Playing as Eggman is a rare thing, and considering his character, yeah, Mech Suit makes sense for him. As for Tails, while yes, he is an inventor, that's been established for a while in the series at this point, I've always found his ability to fly to be more endearing than his ability to create planes and mechs. I really like playing as Tails, but I don't think the Mech Suit fits him nearly as well. I get why they did it, they wanted each character to have a rival with the same style of gameplay, but truthfully I end up liking Eggman mech stages a lot more because, well, for starters, I think they're just designed better, but also I think it works better from a character perspective. I think Iron Gate does a great job of starting things off too. It's a better introduction to the mech stages than Prison Lane. I like the different levels of security you enter the more you play for the stage. I think it's a level that does a good job telling the story as you play through the stage as well. I think that the mech stages are really good for that considering their slower pace. You have a lot more time to pay attention to the details. It's not going above any Sonic or Shadow level on the list. Hell, I think you'd be surprised to see any mech stage go above a Sonic or Shadow level on this list, but all in all, I think it's a pretty solid start to the Dark storyline. After this, we get a boss battle between Shadow and pretty much the same robot as the one Sonic fights. I think the fight works fine though. It gives you a good introduction to controlling both characters, and I'm sure a lot of kids decide to start with the Dark mode first just because it was something new. Honestly, I think I did too, just out of morbid curiosity. Playing as Eggman, I've got to see that. Dry Lagoon, where Knuckles' first stage had one large map split into 4 sections, this one has 2 small maps that you can switch back and forth between using a turtle. It makes a pretty irritating noise until you save him. Like it has guns pointed at it, and its response to this is... I mean, that is the turtle, right? It makes another noise if you use it to get to the other half of the map, and the noise that it's making at the beginning of the stage, it doesn't stop until you help it. But what a weird fucking sound choice for that thing. I think no sound would have conveyed the same information. When I was a kid, I thought that was Rouge making the fucking noise, and I was confused why she only did it in the first level. Oh, and this level is good. I like the music a lot. Kinda hate it when the Emerald Piece is in an underwater cage, though. A little tedious, but hey, it is what it is. Fun level. Sand Ocean. Alright, yeah, we're back to Eggman. I will say with the Dark mode, I think the balance is a little off. Tails and Knuckles share the same number of stages, while Sonic being the main character gets 1 extra, but on the Dark mode, Eggman gets 5, Rouge gets 4 if you don't want to include Route 280, and Shadow only gets 4 stages. Hell, he doesn't even get a segment in Canon's Core, the final level of the game. You play as him less than any other character, so despite Shadow being the character you think about when you think of Adventure 2, Eggman is still the main character of the Dark mode. He's just not really anything new to this series, which drags people's attention to Shadow and Rouge for this game. I mean, I can't think of any other reason people's attention would have been set on Rouge in this game. Anyways, I think this level is just fine once you get Eggman's power-ups, but it's kind of a drag the first time you play it. A lot of waiting around and moving platforms that you can just hover over once you get the power-ups. Come on, this isn't fun, this is padding. Music isn't bad, but it's not all that memorable. It's a weaker stage, but I have a little bit of fun playing it. It's not like Missing Street or Aquatic Mines levels of boring. Radical Highway. Alright, we finally get a Shadow stage, and it's the edgy version of City Escape. It's nighttime in the city, and we've got punk rock music playing. Honestly, despite a lot of the same assets that City Escape use, it's actually closer to the Tails level Mission Street, but I think it works significantly better as a Shadow stage. I personally enjoy the more brighter and colorful Sonic stages to the darker and desaturated Shadow stages, but I could definitely see some kids considering these to be the cool stages in Sonic Adventure 2. This is where we have the fucking badasses. The fucking badass Sonic fans. And for what it's worth, I still think it's fun to play. I just think from an aesthetic angle, I'm a bigger fan of Sonic's designs. Headquarters. I think this is a better version of the Knuckles stage. It still has a lot of the same ideas, but considering it's only Rouge's second stage, they didn't make this level quite the maze that Death Chambers was. Instead of that, you have this giant robot floating around, hunting you down, and if you come into contact with it, your options are to hide in the shadows or get shot. A friend of mine once told me this thing scared the shit out of him when he was a kid. I honestly just normally let it shoot me and grab a ring back or two. I'm fucking rushing this shit, yo. But I think it adds a lot of personality to the stage. I think this one is a lot better than Death Chambers. Better music, less bullshit to deal with, and some cool ideas that help it stand out from the Knuckles version of the level, aside from being easier. Lost Colony. Why does this level show up so low on people's Sonic Adventure 2 tier lists? I love this one. To be fair, a lot of that goes to the music, and I think this is one of the best tracks in the game. I personally see it as Eggman's theme at this point. But aside from that, I just think it's a cool look at the Space Colony arc. In other levels using this set, and it's normally bright and colorful with all the lights being turned back on, but in this level we're basically looking at a place that's been abandoned a long time ago. I think this empty and creepy aesthetic paired with the music really adds to the experience once you know the backstory of Eggman's grandfather and the Space Space Colony arc. I think the stage just nails the feeling of returning to a haunted place after all of those who ran it died so many years ago. In terms of gameplay though, I guess I do understand where people are coming from. I mean, it's nothing terrible in my opinion, but it's also nothing all that special. Hell, it's pretty damn similar to Iron Gate, minus the ability to hover over portions of the level once you unlock that ability. There's even one of those dreaded elevator sequences where you're forced to stay put, but honestly, if you're gonna do mech stages in a Sonic game, maybe this is what they should be. Maybe they should embrace the slower side of the game, but offer substance while you're at it. Mission Street doesn't really do this, it's just cops are after you. Yeah, that's been the case in City Escape. Why the fuck did they go back to the fucking city after Escape in prison? It's not the most fun level, but the feeling it gives off does make it a special one in my opinion. Weapons Bed, yeah, we immediately get another Eggman stage. This one is less good, a lot less good. A lot of the things you shoot in this level are just robots that aren't even activated, but if you shoot a bunch of them, the game tells you that you're cool. This one feels like the most phoned in stage of the entire game. It's like they realized they didn't reuse Metal Harbor's assets once in the game and just decided, fuck it, 13 stages isn't enough for dark mode. Let's just quickly put one more together. It's at least pretty short. Music is a little bland in this one. There isn't really anything all that interesting narrative-wise happening here. It really does feel like this stage was given the bare minimum. Security Hall, and here we have another Rouge level. We are at level 8 and there still has only been one Shadow stage. See what I mean about the balance being a lot worse in dark mode? The timer stresses me out a bit here, but I think it's a fair upgrade and challenge. Not unlike Aquatic Mines, there's a switch activation that helps you get to the Chaos Emeralds, which I'm not too fond of, but to give it some credit, normally only have to mess with it for one emerald, if even that. I played for this stage where none of the emeralds are in those doors that you have to activate by the switches. Oh yeah, you collect Chaos Emeralds in this level. Honestly, Rouge only collects emerald pieces in her first and last level. It's like she only cares about that when Knuckles is around. I really like the music up the stage. While it's not the most fun treasure hunting stage, it's certainly not the worst one. It's probably the most secret agent themed level of the game, which fits Rouge really well. After this we get another boss battle, and it's once again that gun robot that Sonic and Shadow had to fight, but this time it only flies and we play as Rouge. On one hand, it's kinda lame that they're using this enemy 3 different times. On the other hand, it does feel like a different fight, considering you have to find a new way to defeat it since you no longer have your homing attack. Although, I will say when I mentioned figuring it out, I mean, it's pretty obvious how you beat this thing, but I still like them changing it up at least. And it is an alright fight. Maybe they could have at least used a different robot design for this, but I don't mind this boss at all. White Jungle, God, we're on level 9 and we're finally getting our second Shadow stage. This level is decent enough. I kinda just see it as a less good version of Green Forest though. Music isn't as good, appearance isn't as good, it's obviously going for a more gloomy look since it's Shadow. Considering the fact that Sonic and Shadow are both in this forest around the same time means that the gloomy weather just follows Shadow wherever he goes, I suppose. I think there's enough differences here to consider White Jungle a separate level from Green Forest, but not enough differences to really help it stand out. It kinda feels like an Act 2 of Green Forest, but Sonic Adventure doesn't really do acts. This is supposed to be an entirely original level, and it's not. But to be fair, you could throw this criticism at Green Forest as well. It just depends on which one you played first, I guess, or really which one of these levels was made first. I feel more inclined to criticize the dark mode because it really doesn't feel like they gave Shadow their all. Like I said, 4 levels, 2 of which are very similar to Sonic stages. It's a little lame when you really get down to it. I don't know, I think they could have treated this character a little better. He's supposed to be the Sonic equivalent of dark mode. Route 280. Same thing as Route 101, except the plot significance is a little different and the rails on the highway are now missing. Well, only some of them. So it's a little easier to fall off the stage, but it doesn't make the level noticeably harder in my opinion. Sky Rail, probably my favorite Shadow stage in the game. It's definitely the Shadow stage that stands out the most of being its own thing. Where Metal Harbor was often my collect Chow stuff with Sonic stage, Sky Rail is my collect Chow stuff with Shadow stage, because it's simple and to the point and not as long as Radical Highway. Now honestly, I call it my favorite Shadow stage, but Radical Highway does have things above it for sure. It feels like a more complete level, while this one admittedly uses rails for a big chunk of it. The whole level plays out like this. Rail section, small platforming section, another rail section, another small platforming section, you get the idea. Radical Highway feels like it's throwing a lot more ideas at you, while this one feels like it's playing it a lot safer. Still, I like how fast you can get through this one, and it feels like something new at this point in the game. Radical Highway and Mission Street are a little too similar. While this one uses assets from Pumpkin Hill, the two are still pretty drastically different from one another, both in gameplay and presentation. So I think the two stand out better than any other recycled setting. So next we get the Egg Golem boss fight again, except Eggman fights him now, because I guess he got angry at the Egg Golem and insulted him after Sonic defeated him, and then the Egg Golem decided to fight Eggman. Honest to God, I love the fucking cutscene because Sonic says this. So I guess it makes the fight worth it. I mean, actually you can still have that cutscene without the fight happening. The fight itself is just, you shoot at it. It's really easy. It's like the Tails fight at the beginning of the game again, except now we're at the end of the game. I have no problem with Sonic recycling stuff to give more content if the content's good. I think that Adventure 2 reuses a lot of stuff for the levels, and in most cases with this game, I think it's done in a way to add content to the game that's actually enjoyable to play, just not 100% original. But then there's lame stuff like this in Weapons Bed. It really does nothing for me. Mad Space. Boy oh boy are there some people who don't like Mad Space, and honestly, I hear ya. I think it's a way worse design than Knuckles' Meteor Herd, with everything being a lot more scattered on the map, and there being less ground to cover. Meteor Herd was grand in scale, but if you ever fell from a high place, there were multiple platforms with rocket launchers on your way down, and at the very least, you were guaranteed to never fall to your death. In this stage, they have areas where they are going out of their way to try to make you fall to your death, with there being no ground in this stage and a lot of platforms that are very far from each other. I think the concept of there being 3 planets is a lot of fun, but the planets themselves aren't very interesting. It can be super annoying when you're trying to get to one place but then get sucked onto the planet by its gravity. Plus, despite this different concept of 3 planets to explore, they still have that area on the top of the stage to explore that Knuckles has. Why did they need to recycle that? They had their own concept going here. That area worked so much better on the Knuckles version of this level. I think the way to make this level better would have just been to put a little bit more effort into these 3 planets. Make them look a little bit more distinct from one another, make them bigger, put more shit on them, because 2 of these looked very similar and all 3 of them had very little to look at. I think the music is solid and there's potential for the stage to be good, but yeah, I would agree that Mad Space is a pretty bad level. Cosmic Wall, probably my favorite mech stage in the entire game. Just playing with the gravity alone adds a lot of fun to the stage, as you can now boost much higher than you could in any other stage. Now it does have a stand still and shoot section, hell, more than one in this stage, and as I've mentioned before, I think those are lame as hell, but the rest of the stage is fun enough to where I can give it a pass here. Way better space level than what we got with Tails. Final Chase, and now we end with our final Shadow stage, which is pretty damn similar to Final Rush. How neat. Instead of filling the stage up with rails, this stage goes with these weird gravity cylinders that you have to jump onto in order to progress for the stage, and honestly, yeah, it's a pretty decent way to separate yourself from Final Rush. It's a similar level since Sonic and Shadow are both basically heading to the same place at this point in the game, but they found a mechanic that makes this stage feel pretty different from the Sonic version, and I think it works pretty well. It's a fun level. I think with something like White Jungle versus Green Forest, the differences aren't notable enough. They have different layouts, but the mechanics are just about the same, and the ones that are different don't really add much. Yeah, Shadow gets to grab onto those things that launch him to another platform, and Sonic doesn't have those, but it's automatic, so it doesn't really feel like you're doing anything. Platforming with rails versus platforming with gravity does make for some pretty big changes in the gameplay style between these two. Now that I think about it, in every Dark Mode space stage they did something with gravity, while in Hero Mode they really only did this with Crazy Gadget. Interesting. Great way to finish off the Dark Mode levels. Now let's move on to the final portion of the game. We've got 1 more level and 2 more bosses. Cannon Core. As a kid I hated this stage. I thought it was way too difficult, especially the Knuckles part of the stage. I just wanted to see what was going to happen next in the game after almost a TV show episode length cutscene, but I just couldn't get past this fucking part. My brother had to beat it for me. As I've kept replaying this game, however, this level's really grown on me a lot more, and now I can see it for the fun concept that it is. A level where you get to play as all, well, 5 of the 6 main characters is a really neat way to go out in this game. Freeze in time is a big gimmick in each section of the stage, and I think it works well here. The next stage portions are decent, the treasure hunting sections are a little weird since they aren't actually treasure hunting stages, but they have the right idea of the scale of the level. This could have easily been a treasure hunting stage. Rouge's section's really easy, but Knuckles used to be the fucking death of me, as I mentioned before. Nowadays, I don't really mind it. It's easy once you get the hang of it, and I don't mind some of the tension caused by not reaching your destination in time. I get why there is in the Shadow section story-wise, and honestly, him having the boss fight does kind of serve as his section. There's just a cutscene in between it. Sonic's section I wish was a little longer, and that part at the end with the yellow waterfall is a huge fucking dick move. It gives you zero indication that you need to jump up or that there's anything on the other side of this current, but riding down just kills you. As a kid, I had 1 fucking life left and I got killed by this part, and it made me so fucking angry I never forgot it. I think in terms of boss battles, the last 2 are honestly the strongest in the entire game. The Shadow vs. Bio-Lizard fight was a lot of fun. Granted, I think it's a little lazy at the end, like it feels like it's just trying to wrap itself up as fast as possible. And the final fight is fucking legendary. Not only do we have Super Sonic, but we now have a different character with the super form Shadow, each of them taking turns attacking this thing, with motherfucking Live and Learn playing in the background. Sonic Adventure 2 is genuinely my favorite climax to any game of the series. The boss battle isn't even that hard, but it's just so cool. Or the lamest thing on the planet, depending on who you are, but I think it's pretty damn cool. So I guess in short, I think most levels are pretty fun, and even the ones I don't like, I don't hate. Maybe I hate some of their missions to get all the emblems, I still never unlocked Green Hill Zone, the fact that you have to get an A rank in not just every single stage but every mission, along with collecting every single emblem is my least favorite thing about this game. That is asking way too fucking much for a small award, calm the fuck down. The music in this game is great, one of the best of the series. There might be a few tracks in this game that are less memorable or catchy than others, but there isn't any music that I think sounds bad, and I think some of these tracks are genuinely the best of the entire series. A series that has a ton to offer, mind you. The audio mixing is a pretty common critique people bring up, and yeah, it fucking sucks. Mods make it a little bit better, but I can't really defend this given the time it came out. There's plenty of games with better audio mixing that came out way before Adventure 2. Like Sonic 1, for example. Well, that game didn't have dialogue, okay. It's still just about balance and audio levels, come on.
This time, as well as the Chaos Emerald, I call on you to destroy these pests! Come out, my servant!
I love this game, but there's no excuse here. The audio mix was done poorly and it didn't have to be. This isn't even a charm and flaw or a flaw that I'm indifferent to, like the ones that I mentioned at the start of the video. The story is probably my favorite in a Sonic game, but a lot of that goes to not only how much they nailed the climax, but depending on my mood, I can either laugh at it for the dark themes it's attempting in a game intended for children, like the execution scene of Jared Robotnik, or since I grew up with this game taking it completely seriously, I can kind of remember what my initial reaction to these scenes was and get re-immersed. I know this is all pretty stupid, but I also know I'm not alone in having genuine investment in the story at a point in my life. I really love it. I think for the future of storytelling in Sonic games, there's two ways I look at it. One is to find a middle ground between Adventure 2 and Colors. You can have a lighter tone with more comedy, but don't make every cutscene Sonic standing in a place telling jokes. One could be a little bit more self-aware, and one could be a little less boring. The other way I look at it is, fuck that. Take yourself too seriously. This series is a lot funnier when it's trying to be edgy rather than when it's trying to be funny. Shadow the Hedgehog is funnier than Sonic Colors in every single way possible. I think what works better in Adventure 2 than Shadow, however, is I don't actually think it's completely void of that lightheartedness, or that it doesn't have a sense of humor. It's just not as obvious as it is in Colors. Sonic is a little bit snarky in this game. Him and Robotnik do have some funny interactions.
You're pretty persistent for a hedgehog, aren't you? You're still alive.
Just letting Knuckles pilot the shuttle on the way over here was more dangerous than you could ever be.
I think personality-wise, through voice acting, animation, and writing, Sonic is much better in Adventure 2 than he was in Adventure 1. Adventure 1 had some nice character development on the other hand, which, yeah, I think Adventure 2 had a little bit of. Rouge and Shadow are new, but you do understand them by the end. Knuckles and Sonic don't go through much change aside from the better portrayal of them, again, that's just my opinion. Robotnik, I feel, gets a ton of development in this game, with us actually following him start to finish for once. Some of his family history is revealed, and he does have a very nice and sincere conversation with Tails at the end of the game.
As a child, I looked up to my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him. But did he really mean to destroy us?
It's honestly one of my favorite interactions of the entire series. Tails, as I said earlier, builds off his character development from Adventure 1, taking it a step further. And then Amy doesn't get nearly as much to do in this game as she did in the previous one, not even being playable anymore, but I will say I still think they had the right idea with her. She wanted to be brave and go on her own adventures without getting captured in the first game, which she still does get captured, but manages to go on after that and finally stand up for herself. I think this game kind of takes her a step forward by her being an active member of the team. But yeah, you don't get to play as her, so at times it kind of feels like Sonic and Tails are just stuck with Amy. Maybe they should have done 4 characters for each mode. Hero mode gets Amy, and then for Dark mode you can use Fang. How about Fang? Use Fang. God, I was supposed to go for these final notes quickly, but I've been talking about the story as if it's a new segment. I really like the story. You could argue it's dumb how dark they made it, but they are fully embracing it, so I can at least have fun with it. I'd rather them do this than try to be meta. No story or minimal story is okay too, but I never want to play a game with Colors quality cutscenes again. That's what I'm getting at. And with that, I feel like I've said everything I need to about Sonic Adventure 2. I really, really like it. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be perfect. At least not for me. I'm giving Sonic Adventure 2 a 9 out of 10. Oh, and before we go, here's my level rankings from worst to best. Mission Street, Weapons Bed, Route 101 and Route 280, Mad Space, Aquatic Mine, Eternal Engine, Death Chambers, Sand Ocean, Egg Quarters, Prison Lane, Iron Gate, Security Hall, White Jungle, Cannon's Core, Hidden Base, Meteor Herd, Crazy Gadget, Dry Lagoon, Lost Colony, Cosmic Wall, Final Chase, Final Rush, Wild Canyon, Pumpkin Hill, Green Forest, Radical Highway, Sky Rail, Pyramid Cave, Metal Harbor, City Escape.